Yeah, so the topic today is Azure cost optimization. Uh, uh, and the uh, and the presenter is Puneet Shah. So, for many businesses, governing cost is a major concern when adopting cloud technologies. Balancing performance demand, adoption pacing, cloud services cost can be challenging. With a practical approach based on learnings from hundreds of customer engagement, this session will enable you to take a solution-based design for Microsoft Azure and make it cost-effective. Based on field experiences and real-world scenarios, you will understand common pitfalls to avoid as service-specific recommendations to realize significant reduction in the total cost of ownership for Azure solutions. So Puneet is part of the App Consult team. So some of you are part of the Microsoft for Starters portfolio and might have interacted with him. So Puneet is a technical consultant with over 15 years of experience and with engaging with customers as a SME, a subject matter expert on Microsoft and cloud technologies. At Microsoft, Puneet works with startups on how best to use Azure capabilities, custom and aligned with the organization's goal. He helps architect, design, implement, migrate, and grow applications on Microsoft Azure platform. Before I go on to hand over to Puneet, we also want to quickly talk about the social media challenge. So Kabir will be putting up the slide for that. So this is the 10th seminar that we're having in the Scale Up Thursdays webinar series. And we have a social media challenge. You can post about the event, as you can see on the screen, using the hashtag Scale Up Thursdays, and you can win a swag bag from Microsoft for Startups. With that, I hand it over to Puneet Shah, and he will actually go introduce the topic, and then we can go deeper into that. Meanwhile, we will be answering questions on the chat. So if you have any questions, we will be taking 2 breaks for the questions. Please keep on putting your questions on the chat, and I'll try my best to answer them. The questions, we will also get a second opinion from Puneet, and we can answer more specific scenarios as much as we can during the time that we have for your specific cases as well. So with that, handing over to you, Puneet. Let's talk about Azure cost optimization.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Vinayak. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, based on where you're from. Thank you for taking time out to make to this particular webinar. My name is Puneet. I'm an Azure App Consult engineer based in Dubai, working with Microsoft for close to 15 years now. In my current role, I primarily work with startups and pro direct customers across the globe with essentially anything they want to do with Azure, right? From designing, architecting, implementing, it could be like optimizing and stuff like that. So that's what my focus has been since 3 years. And today's session, I'm just going to start with the presentation as well. So we're going to focus on what we refer to as Azure cost optimization. So before we get into the details and things like that, what I want to make very sure and ensure that everybody is aware of the fact that this particular session is not about, hey, I'm going to give you a magic formula or a trick or a script at the end of it where you run it, you specify, hey, I want my bill to be reduced by 15% and there you go. No, nothing of that sort. It's going to be pretty practical approach. What are we going to do during this session is, we've done this engagement with hundreds of startup customers across the globe, and there are a certain set of learnings. We've seen common pitfalls, mistakes that have happened with these startups, and after analyzing all those cases over the period of time, we've identified a bunch of points. When we take them into consideration, it can significantly help us reduce the overall, cloud consumption charges. And that is what this session is all about, for us to share those findings and then ensure that you are able to take those learnings and avoid, those particular set of problems that other startups have run into. And at the same time, make sure, we're running your solutions in the most optimized way that is possible. So we're going to start initially with challenges. Why is it important, whether you're a startup or an enterprise and things like that? Then we're going to delve a bit into what are the causes, common causes, and then we're going to get into recommendations. And these recommendations, considering we are focusing this specifically on Azure, we will have service specific recommendations also coming into the picture. So now what are the major challenges? Now, because of the advent of the cloud computing, there has been a major shift, in terms of your IT spend moving away from your capital expenditure to your operational expenditure. This transition is big, and as we embrace this change, it certainly calls for a change in everything. We talk about your traditional outlook, your processes, your culture when it comes to IT spends, and one very good example about this would be like how many of us on the call at this point of time are confident enough to answer, hey, can you tell me exactly what your consumption number is for every month? This is the challenge, the unpredictability. Budgeting is no longer a one-time activity that we used to do once a year or once a 3 year where you go for licensing and things like that. I'm pretty sure, like, all of us on the call would prefer a one-click solution where you get a very simplified billing and predictability. But considering how the cloud services operate, how they are built and things like that, that is far from reality. And that is the reason we are on this call so that we can learn from all the other customers that we worked with and ensure that, we take those learnings and ensure that we are running in an optimized way. So when we come, let's say, talk about why is this needed in the first place. So let's take a example of a startup, that it's, starting. And it all started with a customer giving me a call one particular day. And it's like, hey, Puneet, all said and done, the solution is working great. We've been having lots of new customers and all of it, but there's no way we can sustain this with the consumption charges that we are billing billed, on a monthly basis. We are not breaking even at the moment. Is there something that you can do about it? And that is when, we started looking through what their application was, what their consumptions were like and stuff. And then we spent a bit of time figuring out, how did they end up in this stage? So typically, this is the common pattern that we've seen with many of the startups we worked with. So when you start, your big focus is on innovation, getting to market, as soon as possible, highly agile and things like that. You tie up with a service provider like Microsoft for startup and things like that. You get initial sponsorships and things like that. What happened eventually is, while you're focusing on the core things in terms of making your application successful, go to market and things like that, some of these things, because the consumption is sponsored at that particular point of time, many of the cost related aspects get overlooked in terms of how the application is designed or what resources are provisioned and things like that. And typically when you reach that stage where you're maturing into your own paid account or an enterprise agreement account and things like that, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, last 6 months my consumption was close to, let's say, five or $7,000, and there's no way I can sustain this. Can I do something about this? And all of a sudden it becomes a major challenge as such. This is true for many of the startups we've worked with, where the applications are designed ground up in the cloud using cloud native approach or architecture patterns and things like that, less of migration from traditional workloads onto the cloud. Similarly, when we talk about enterprises, you have like bunch of application solutions running on your on-premise environment for years together. You somehow push your management, hey, we need to go to cloud because that is where it is. We're going to have significant cost savings and stuff like that. You spend a lot of effort, figure out your migration journeys. I love migration, to be honest, because that is where you learn all the things because so many things break. But yeah, leaving that aside, what happens is 1 month, 2 months down the line, once you're live on the cloud, eventually the question does pop up. Where is the cost comparison? Are we saving? Was it worth the effort? And often we've seen, like, just because it wasn't done in the correct way, or maybe there wasn't enough thought put in to ensure it is done in a lean and an optimized way, we've seen some scenarios where the cost on cloud after the migration was actually higher than what they had earlier. And this is where, your budgeting goes for a toss and everything goes for a toss thereafter, which is why optimization has to be one of the key parameters, especially when it comes to cost, when in every decision that you take, whether it's technical, non-technical and things like that, because it is going to be an ongoing basis. Okay. So what are the common causes we've seen? First and foremost is the knowledge of the platform, of the services, of the alternatives that are available, how are they priced and things like that. We'll dig a bit deep into this in a while. Then next comes as governance. and then we talk about sponsorship as well as the impact. So talking specifically about knowledge, what happens is when you, most of the times, the decisions when we say like, hey, one service is introduced to you, which is doing something really, really good, I've often seen customers, adopt that. It addresses their technical needs and everything, scales, works as expected, and things like that. But very less thought is put into nitty-gritties of it in terms of how that service is built actually. In terms of, hey, let's say for example, storage. We'll see, oh, we just look at the charges in terms of, hey, per gig per month, it is negligible, probably around, 10 cents or something like that. But that storage, when you talk to it, there are transaction costs associated with that. This is just one random example. Now, if you have a heavy traffic website that is interacting millions of time in a month with that particular storage account and things like that, that will contribute to the cost. So it is very, very important that we understand for every component of your solution how the pricing works. Okay, the other aspect is about the scalability. Majority of cloud services provide you auto scale capabilities. What I've seen with many customers is they still provision it with the peak load. Like let's say for example, hey, during my peak loads, I need 4 instances of a service or something like that. They'll provision with the 4 instances, which is pretty much, I would say, a traditional approach with any on-premise deployment kind of thing, without evaluating, the auto scale capabilities of almost all the services that are available in cloud. You talk about compute, you talk about database, you talk about Cosmos, so many of them. We'll get into details about all of them. The next aspect is when you make a decision, for adopting a particular service into your solution and things like that, did you evaluate all the alternatives? Let's say I want to use NoSQL. Did you evaluate if I want to use NoSQL, there is Azure Storage Table, there is Cosmos DB, and could be some other services available in the marketplace. Which one fits your requirement in terms of technical need as well as your budgetary constraints? Always ensure you evaluate all the options, take into consideration pros and cons of each of those services when incorporated as part of your solution, right from ownership, management, support, cost, flexibility, and all those things. And then decide, hey, having considered all these points, this is the service that we're going to use. Okay. The next thing that I've often seen people overlook is consolidation. A very good example of this comes when we talk about, let's say, Azure App Services. I've seen customers who have like 15, 20 line of business web apps deployed on Azure, and some of them, they hardly have any traffic, maybe like 100 hits a month, or even like, hits only during quarter ends because of the reporting, financials, and stuff like that. What happens in such cases is they end up deploying new instances of app service plans and all of it, whereas it could have been pretty easy if there is proper thought or consideration put in, like, hey, this service I know, although I can have separate front ends, my hosting platform, which is app service plan, can still be reused between different applications. And that is one way of basically consolidating all of these things together and reducing the overall cost. And then last but not the least, configure and use the service in an optimal way. You may want to, I've often seen customers want to do some kind of POC. They go ahead, deploy, try with the premium tier or maybe the topmost tier of the service in terms of evaluating the capabilities as a POC. But eventually they realized, hey, we're going to need this feature 6 months or 12 months down the line, but you don't really scale down the service that was provisioned and you start paying the premium without using those features. So to summarize, knowledge in terms of the pricing, in terms of scalability aspects, in terms of alternative services, as well as consolidating the resources that you've deployed as well as cost, it plays a very big role in your understanding of what you're spending and how you can optimize the same. The next big thing that comes into picture is the governance. And now governance by itself is a pretty huge topic. We can have a session focused on that, later on. But to give you an idea, gone are the days, where we used to simply say to developers, hey, you do not have access to production environment anymore. You need something, you tell the IT admins, they're going to do that. but that is pretty much counter operative to the whole agile model that we take, and which is where cloud native governance comes into picture, which is essentially removing all those barriers where developers are free to do whatever they want to do, but at the same time, as a what do you say, the administrator, cloud owner kind of thing, you still have appropriate control, visibility in place to ensure you still limit the actions of developers, even though they have all the uh, permissions and things to do that, which is why these are some of the factors or the capabilities which are available in Azure when it comes to governance. Talking about policy is essentially a service in Azure that helps to create, assign and manage policies. And when I talk about policies, this is essentially telling like, hey, I'm going to have a policy where I tell my or the users of my Azure portal, hey, you cannot deploy resources outside, for example, India data centers. Or for that matter, if you're going to create a virtual machine, these are the only sizes of VMs that you can provision. So you can create and define these policies and apply. One of the bigger thing to notice here is policy, unlike the RBAC, which is role-based access control, policy is resource focused, not user focused. So you can create based on individual resources what kind of policies you want to implement and thereby control the entire environment. Blueprint is another good thing which is available out of the box. It basically helps you deploy and update cloud environments in a repeatable manner using composable artifacts. It basically, you define your blueprint using policies, role-based access control, templates, all of them that essentially go into defining your environment. And then you can have multiple stamps of that environment as and when you want to recreate that. The next that comes is Resource Graph. It is a service again available out of the box in Azure, which provides you an efficient and performant way of exploring all the resources across all the subscriptions and management groups. You can effectively, help govern your environment. And what this queries basically essentially provide you is complex filtering. I want to see all the storage in this particular region. I don't care which resource group or which subscription it belongs to, something of that sort, And then we can also use those queries to assess the impact of applying policies in a very vast cloud environment. The management group is basically helping you define your organizational hierarchy. It doesn't have to be your billing hierarchy, but essentially what we refer to as organizational hierarchy, where you can say, hey, my HR has one subscription dedicated to that. My, sales and marketing, they have one subscription. And if you want to have same policies applied to them because they are like, let's say, non-technical department, for example, you can club them together under a management group and start defining policies at that particular management group as well. And then almost all cloud service provider, they do provide you some mechanism, of monitoring what your cloud spend looks like, which is what Azure Cost Management is all about that you see in the portal. And the best thing about this, I don't know if people have started using this, but in my personal experience working with, I would say like hundreds and hundreds of startups over the past 2 or 3 years, many of these things are overlooked. Okay. And to be honest, all of this is available out of the box at no additional cost. These are mechanisms available into your Azure portal free of cost for you to ensure your overall subscription and resources are streamlined and you have complete control over your environment as well as visibility into all the resources that are deployed as part of the environment. Okay. So having said that, this is where we plan to have a quick break. Vinayak, do you have any questions at the moment?
Yes, Puneet, I think this is a good starting template. And based on this, there are actually 3 questions. The first one is by Rohit Sharma. So recently, Cloudin was merged into Azure. So he wants to know how mature is ACM compared to Cloud Health for optimization.
So it's pretty much, I wouldn't say like all the 100% features are in there. But I would say most of the practical things that I've seen customers use it are already there. For those who are from the startups, the support for using Azure Cost Management for your sponsored subscription is not there yet. It is going to be made live. I do not have an ETA for that at the moment. So for anybody who has a sponsored subscription, the way to monitor your consumption is still to go to Microsoft Azure sponsorships.com and be able to download your report. For all the other subscription types like enterprise agreement, pay as you go, and things like that, almost, I would say all those features which are like your reporting, your alerting, your budgeting, almost all those practical features are live and they work pretty fine.
Cool. The next question is by Aditi. I think she's part of our bread program. So we have given them about 25,000 USD. So which can be spent over a period of 12 months. So it roughly comes in Indian rupees to up to 1.5 lakhs. So she wants to know, how do you iteratively define your budget, implement changes on Azure Stack, measure cost incurred, and effectively use our 25K USD credits. And she also wants if you have some demo as well, maybe some of these tools as well.
I can walk through that. Can we park that question because I have some points to talk about it during the concluding section.
Sure.
Okay, so as to avoid repetition, later on.
Sure. And the last question for this section is regarding blueprints, which we just covered. So Anand Subhash asks, can blueprints also hold SQL schema for SQL Azure?
So blueprints at this point of time. So schema, I'm not 100% sure, but as far as ARM templates are concerned, or we've even announced support for Terraform templates and all of that. If in your ARM templates, you have some mechanism to, let's say, run some kind of bootstrapping and things like that to create the databases and stuff like that, it should work. But out of the box for schema support, I'm not aware, and to be honest, I don't think so at the moment.
Cool. Yeah, I see that both you and me are color coordinating. Well, it's not so; it's just a coincidence. But yeah, it's kind of funny as well. So yeah, with that, I think let us move on with the rest of the presentation. And I mean, please keep your questions coming in the console, in the chat, and we'll take another maybe short break to answer more questions. Over to you, Puneet.
Cool. Okay, perfect. Now this is where we're getting into the roller coaster mode where we've reached the top and now the ride starts. Okay, we're going to get into service specific recommendations across compute, across data, across many other services and things like that. So let's focus on Azure Compute to begin with. Okay, I'm pretty sure almost all of cloud users, we have some kind of compute resources deployed in terms of VMs, VM scale set and things like that. So typically what we do, and this will partially answer Aditya's question also. When I work with customers and they say, hey, this is going up, I typically start with these questions. Let's say, and this is going to be like questions format. So when I'm talking to customer, I typically start when it comes to compute. Okay, I see you have a bunch of VMs deployed there. What percentage of these VMs are actually production? Okay. We realize typically in some cases they say simply like all of them, which is fair enough. Sometimes they say 70%, 50%. So for the non-production VMs, do you need them running 24/7? If the answer is yes, well and good. If no, can we have a policy in place? There are templates available, runbooks available in Azure where you can define, hey, for this particular resource group or this set of VMs, I want you to turn them off every day at 7 p.m. and automatically turn them on at 7 a.m. If you look at it, that's not a big deal, but think of it from the compute charges perspective, that is close to 50% savings on compute charges on a daily basis on every instance that you have. Doesn't require too much of effort. Everything can be automated. The next thing that comes into picture here is, often we've seen, like for this VMs, how often after you provision, like, when you're migrating workloads from on-premise to cloud, you typically tend to match the capacity in terms of RAMs and CPUs. How often do you measure those metrics? It should be a regular practice where you review the metrics and the performance of the VMs. Let's say, for example, last 7 days, last 30 days, and actually determine whether there is a potential to downsize some of these VMs. I've often seen like CPU consumptions in many scenarios. You have this good VMs that you try to match to the capacity of on-premise. But let's say for the whole last 30 days, I've never seen CPU or a memory spike over 15 or 20%. Is there a potential to downsize them? And I'm not saying you should immediately do it. Evaluate. There may be scenarios where you can say, hey, we have a report running every 3 months. So that's when we need it. Now, is this the right way to deploy it then? Where you have highly underutilized capacity running for 3 months and paying for it when it's not really needed. Okay. Similarly, so on, like we spoke about 24/7. Now, I'm sorry. Let's talk about the other aspect. You say these are production, they need to be running 24/7 and things like that. Why not then consider reserved instances? What happens with reserved capacity, you upfront tell Microsoft or Azure, like, hey, I'm going to need this VM for 1 year or 3 year. And depending on the commitment that you sign up for, you get significant discounts on that family of VMs. It is not a particular size, it's the family, and you can switch between the VMs in the same family. And at the same time, what we've done a few months back is you don't even have to pay at one go. You can still pay on a monthly basis. The only thing you're doing is going ahead and committing for that period of time and thereby getting benefits in terms of discounted prices for all the VMs that are running. Okay. Now, the other thing that I often discuss is, let's say for the dev test environment, if you have quite a few VMs hosting your dev test environments and things like that, uh, I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but where you can create additional subscriptions under your subscription. And when you create that, you can actually mark it as dev test subscription. What happens when you mark it as dev test subscriptions is you get priced differently for the resources under that subscription. For example, all the Windows VM, they will be charged at Linux rates. The only caveat here is, as the name suggests, it is a dev test subscription, which means there is no SLA for anything that runs in that subscription, which is fair enough for your dev test workloads, essentially, but can be a significant benefit for hosting all your dev test environments. May not be for staging because you need them probably for 24/7 or running your load test or something like that, or you may even need SLS for that. But at least for dev test, it can be a significant benefit. Another good example would be, let's say, for example, you're running SQL on a VM. If it is your dev test environment, instead of running proper SQL Enterprise or things like that, can you evaluate running SQL Developer Edition? It pretty much has all the Enterprise Edition features available with only one caveat that you cannot use it for production. So thereby, it can help you reduce significant licensing costs, which for SQL are per core basis. For production, of course, you need to have what you need to have. Okay. Similarly, we also have, earlier what we used to refer to as low priority VMs. We now have what we call as spot instances. For mission critical workloads and things like that, I wouldn't recommend using spot instances as such because, they can get evicted as and when the policies, match to those rules and things like that. But let's say you have loads in terms of where it is significant to for your application itself to handle if there is a breakdown and restart from a particular point and continue computing or whatever is needed. For example, some kind of batch workload that you have or anything of that sort. In that case, this can be significant cost saver when you're using VM scale sets. So I've seen customers using VM scale sets where they've created one VM scale set with standard VMs. They've created another VM scale set with spot instances or low priority, and they put them both the skill sets behind a load balancer. And whenever there is a burst of load and things like that, they scale out the spot instances. So even if all the instances from your spot instances are evicted, the standard instances are still there, your app is still up and running. But for all those burst load scenarios, you're running VMs with a significant, less cost than the actual pay-as-you-go rates. And last but not the least, when it comes, essentially, it is about hybrid. If you have existing licenses and things like that, you can significantly save by bringing those licenses to the cloud. But there are links available where you can simply go ahead and check in the when you go to pricing for VMs and things like that, or even for hybrid benefits, you can realize it is significant. Whether it is Windows, whether it is SQL, whatever license you're owning it, if you have already, make sure you use them, because that's going to be significantly beneficial in terms of overall cost that you run. Okay. Other thing that I often discuss, let's say for production workload, we highly recommend you use premium disk. But for non-production workloads, like your dev or your integration environment and things like that, do you really need them? The reason being, unlike the standard disk where you pay for the resources that are consumed, let's say you create a 1 TB disk and you're consuming 100 gigs, you pay for 100 gigs. Premium disks are fixed price on a monthly basis. So, you created a 250 gigs disk, it doesn't matter what amount do you use for that, what amount of storage do you use in that disk, you're paying for 250 gigs. So evaluate that also, okay? And then that's pretty much in terms of when it comes to compute related to VM scale set and all of it. Talking about databases, one of the most common things I've seen with, let's say, initial discussions will focus on, let's say, Azure database for SQL. How can you decide, let's say when you talk about SQL database, there are so many pricing models that you have DTU based model, you have vCore based model, you have managed instances, you can run SQL on IaaS. Did you put enough thought in deciding what is the right pricing tier that will match your performance need as well as your budgeting needs? Okay, what is the capacity that you need in terms of the data storage, in terms of your query capacity, in terms of, let's say, DTUs and all of it? For many people, DTU itself is a worrying concept, but one of the things that I've seen, which is, like, I would say more often than not, is, let's say for example, you have one job running every day at midnight, or you have one job running every weekend, which needs significant capacity in terms of your SQL workload. And what I've seen customers do is typically go ahead and provision with, let's say for example, 500 DTUs, and rest of the week we see not even 100 DTUs are being used. That is highly, what do you say, we'll be happy because that's where the consumption is coming from. But if you look at it from the resource deployment perspective, it is not an optimized way. It is highly underutilized. The other thing people often miss out is like thinking of premium tier in SQL is very costly. So we should stick to standard, even if we have to go to 400 or 600 DTUs. So this is where, the knowledge about what these pricing tiers are, what features or capabilities do they provide, they really come into, picture. Let's say, for example, your standard SQL DTUs, the storage is backed by standard disk. Whereas in premium, it is backed by SSDs. To translate it to your workloads, your IOPS, your disk latency in your standard can go up to, for example, 5 to 10 milliseconds. In premium, it is guaranteed at less than 2 milliseconds, which is almost 5 times performance gains. Now, if you have queries which are highly IO intensive and things like that, this can make significant difference. So for example, if you need 600 DTUs in standard, you may not need the same amount of DTUs in premium. And the other advantages that you get with premium is read scale out capabilities at no cost, which essentially means when you have a database in a premium tier when using DTU model, or a business critical tier when using vCore model, what you can enable read only scale out, which means you get additional endpoint. And if your application has a workload pattern of, let's say, 60% write versus 40% read, or 40% write versus 60% read, you can divert your read-only traffic to a different endpoint. And you get this at no additional cost. And thereby, if you see, compared to standard model, because all the traffic is going to a single endpoint and a single compute resource behind the scene, the capacity required may be higher, but in premium, it can be significantly reduced because you're now diverting traffic to 2 different compute resources which are available to you, at no additional cost. The only thing that will change here is a bit of effort in your application design, because now you'll need to use a different connection string for read queries and a different one for write queries. And the only thing that changed in connection string is just a flag. Okay. So this was just one good example where we just, don't get into the details of understanding what exactly it means to use premium tier versus a standard tier in a SQL. Of course, for dev and test and other things where developer is just working, building application, all of that, it may not be a good use case scenario for production. I would highly recommend, we get into such kind of details, do what do you say, contrast and compare all the options and then decide, hey, on the paper, at this moment, this looks cheaper, but if I take into consideration all these factors, this is going to be a better option for me moving forward. Okay. And similarly, let's say when it goes, other aspect is for anything that you host on the databases in SQL, out of the box on the portal, there is a section that gives you query performance insights. Evaluate that on a regular basis, maybe weekly basis with the developers, sorry, DBAs on your team, because there may be one or two bad queries, could be few more that are hogging up all the resources that are provisioned out there. Evaluate with DBS, can you optimize them? There are also built-in capabilities where it will tell you, hey, you need to turn on this indexes based on the query patterns and things like that. But I often, recommend evaluate those queries which are, and you can get details about those queries in terms of long-running queries, disk-intensive queries, CPU-intensive queries, and then work with DBAs to optimize them. So for example, if the need was currently 200 DTUs, it could very much be possible once you tune it, that will go down significantly. So do this on a regular basis, which is where tuning comes into picture. Okay. And last but not the least, like some of the people I've seen, what they do here is, hey, I have many databases. Let me just create an elastic pool and put them in. Elastic pool has its very own specific use case. It is a good capability, but it won't be a good case for example, let's say if you have 10 databases where you do not have too much of traffic, you are good with, let's say, for example, 10 DTUs, putting them in an elastic pool will actually increase your, consumption charges. So always evaluate, whether elastic pool is going to be beneficial for me. There's no like thumb rule as such, but we typically say like, all these databases, if they are going to have the peak traffic at the same time, it may not still solve the purpose. Okay. The other aspect is typically we say like your peak resource requirement should typically be 1.5 times of your average resource requirement. Again, that's not a thumb rule, but a general guideline that we follow in terms of determining whether elastic database is the thing, that's going to be beneficial for me without using it directly. Okay. Again, as with many other services, reserved instances can come in really, really helpful here, as well as hybrid if you're using SQL on IIS. But primarily, look at your resource consumption, let's say for last 7 days, last 30 days, look at the tuning opportunities, then evaluate what pricing tier is the correct one for you. And even if you're using that, is this the same thing that you need for your dev test? I've often seen like what happens is people are trying, like SQL has built-in capability of geo replication. It also has like auto failover groups. You try those features. Let's say here you had premium 400 DTUs. When you replicate to another region, you still have like 400 DTUs, another service running there, which is just doing replication. Now, if you have a genuine business requirement of high availability, disaster recovery, where your RPOs, RTOs are defined and things like that, go ahead, use it. But if you don't have thought through those things, and you're just evaluating as a feature and then forget to turn off, you're simply multiplying your cost by twice. And I've often seen this as an oversight with many customers. Hey, we were trying this feature to see how this works and stuff like that. And it's been lying there for 3 months. And I don't know, we are paying for that for since then. So if you have a good use case scenario for, multi-region, which we're going to talk about in a while, go ahead and absolutely use it. But remember, I mean, for all practical reasons, there should be a thumb rule. Any decision, any click that you do on the Azure portal, you need to know, you need to be entirely sure why I'm doing it, and if there is something that needs to be undone after you've evaluated a feature and things like that, you should definitely do that as well. Don't miss out, which is where governance plays a significant role. Talking about Cosmos DB, this is another, the reason I've stated this explicitly out here is of late, too many customers, I've worked with, they raise concerns about what, of the cost implications of using Cosmos DB. For us, again, let's start with understanding how does Cosmos DB charge you? There are two factors for the cost. One is risk, what do you say? RUs, that is basically the resources that you use to query your databases. And the other one is basically the actual storage that you use. Okay, by itself, it is one of the best services that we have in terms of capabilities that it provides, in terms of SLAs that it provides, a multi-model, whether you want to use MongoDB, DocumentDB, Cassandra, Gremlin, whatever it is, one particular service that gives you access to all those models, out of the box as such. So this is again where the conversations, now you'll see some of these points overlap, but the single biggest factor I've seen with customers where they've had issues using Cosmos DB and running into high cost is there wasn't enough thought put into determining what is the right partition key for that solution. This is a single biggest factor, because what happens is, depending on what you defined as your partition key, behind the scenes, Cosmos DB will place all the records with the same partition key on what we refer to as logical partitions, and then on the same logical partitions. And then it is the job of the Cosmos DB service. You can look up the documentation to get into more details, but I'm just giving you an overview. It's the job of the Cosmos DB service to place these logical partitions on the actual physical partitions on the underlying infrastructure. What happens is, if you, let's say, for example, you're talking about employee database, and then you decided, hey, I'm going to put employee ID as a partition key. What it will do is, behind the scene, every employee will go to a different partition. And then suppose you want to run a query, I want all the employees based in Mumbai, India. When this happens, when the cross partition queries happens and things like that, it will eventually have to scan through all the partitions one at a time to be able to give you the output. And when that happens, the RU requirement for your query significantly increases. I'm just giving you one layman's example in terms of how things go wrong with incorrect partition keys as such, but this is where things go wrong significantly. And you don't necessarily then need a very high number of RUs, because let's say if you just increase RUs, it will work. But what if tomorrow traffic increases a bit? Again, you're going to end up with the same problem. So put in enough thoughts in terms of what is going to be your partition key. Okay. And then provision your capacity. What we've also released in build last week or a week, a couple of weeks back, is auto scale. Now, what you can do here is, instead of you determining a predefined values of RUs, you can say, hey, this is the maximum, let's say 5,000 RUs that my consumption go up to. And so whatever the value you define as the maximum, the minimum is typically 10% of that. So in this case, it will become 500 RUs, and then you enable auto scale. What Cosmos DB will do here is, between these two values, depending on the requirements of your application traffic, it will auto scale. You don't have to do any manual activities. So it will not consume 5,000 RUs all the time. So depending on the load, it will consume more RUs to an upper limit that is defined by you. When it comes to dev test, what I tell people often is, in Cosmos DB, you can define RUs at the individual collection level as well as the database level. The only thing here is, you can define that only at the time of creating the databases. Okay. So for dev test, what I can do here is define my RUs at the databases. So all the collections under that databases will share that RUs. Instead of me specifying RUs at individual containers, which can significantly increase the cost as such, this can be a very good approach for your dev test workloads. I've often seen customers who have, let's say, for example, 20, 30 odd containers according to their requirements, and they know, hey, out of this 20, 30 odd containers, only 15 are going to be like very infrequently used. 5 are going to have heavy traffic. So what they do is typically provision the throughput at database layer for this 15 because they don't have much traffic, the throughput is shared. And for the other 5, which are heavy traffic and significantly, higher RU requirements, they provision dedicated capacity on those containers. This can also significantly help you reduce the cost. Again, reserved capacity will definitely play a role here where you can upfront go ahead and commit. And one of the things that they've announced that build, which is not yet, we are expecting it to be available for preview in a couple of months, is the serverless approach. In this case, what they are coming up with an approach where you do not provision any capacity. Should be very good in terms of your dev test workloads. You will exactly pay for the RUs that you use. You do not have to say, hey, I want a collection with 400 RUs and it becomes your fixed cost. Every time you run a query, whatever RUs you consume, you pay for that. So it is going to be a truly serverless model that is going to come around. Okay. Other data recommendations, storage. I'm talking about Azure Storage Service. I've often seen, like, when you're using storage for whatever purpose, like blob storage, table storage, and things like that, one of the things that people often overlook is the redundancy model. What is the need of your business application in terms of redundancy? I've often seen people just enable read access geo-redundant storage, which will be almost 3 or 4 times your local redundant storage. As I mentioned earlier, if there is a genuine need, you know why do you need it and things like that, be absolutely sure, go ahead and use it. But I've often asked customers like, hey, why do you have this REGRS? And they're like, I don't know, because we want it available. And then I ask them, hey, do you going to use the secondary endpoint for read purpose? No, never. We just want it in a different region. Then why not use GRS? Why use RAGRS? So every redundancy option that you see in the storage will have a different pricing implication. And remember, when the data is replicated to a different region, there is also outbound network data bandwidth that is consumed that is also charged. When it comes to disks, more often than not, when you delete the VMs, you forget deleting the associate disks. If it is a standard disk, it's okay. The cost will be, much lesser. But if there are premium disks that you created with VMs and you've deleted the VM and those disks are lying there orphaned, those contribute significantly to the, I would say, your overall consumption numbers because you're not using them. Many a times because you've deleted the VMs, you're not even looking at these resources. They're just lying there orphaned and contributing to your cost. Next come Redis. When it comes to managed Azure cache for Redis, determine the right pricing tier. This is what I've often seen, like, hey, I ask customer, why do you need this? The premium tier. And it's like, hey, I need high performance. When I say, like, what kind of high performance do you need? What kind of like number of concurrent connections do you have? It's like 100. What is the cache size you're going to need? Maybe 100 MB, 200 MB. Why do you need this if you don't even need integration with your virtual network and things like that? So if there is a need, again, if there is a conscious decision made taking into consideration your application requirement, absolutely go ahead and use it. But more often than not, I've seen like it is not in line with what they've provisioned. Similarly, for open source databases like Postgre, MySQL, MariaDB, and all of that, they do provide read scale out capability where you can have a secondary endpoint. It's not as free as the premium in Azure SQL database, but you can pretty much use those built-in capabilities to route your queries and make sure you do not need very heavy compute capabilities for your primary workloads as such. When it comes to other services that you use, let's say, for example, we refer to like HD Insight clusters or Databricks and things like that. When it comes to HD Insight cluster, for example, it cannot be shut down or paused. The only way is to stop getting charged is to delete the cluster. There's no other way. And what happens is what you could do if it is not something that you use on a regular basis, kind of like 24/7 and things like that, you can have systems in place where you delete these clusters. But remember, the associated storage is still there. So when you spawn up a new cluster, you will still have your environment details available with with the same storage that you plan to use with the HD Insight cluster. Similarly, for Databricks, for example, if you have only scheduled jobs to run, leverage data engineering clusters. If you have, let's say, analytics cluster, enable things like auto termination. If it is idle for the default value is, I guess, 2 hours, 120 minutes, it will automatically go ahead and deploy, delete or decommission that particular cluster. And there is also an option when it comes to, let's say, instead of deploying one analytic cluster for every team, evaluate the use of what we call as high concurrency cluster, which can be used by multiple users, which is essentially an optimized way for fine-grained sharing among different members who are using Databricks cluster within the environment. Okay. App services, we discussed one of these points, like for every different app services, it is not necessary you need a different app service plan. If there is a capacity requirement and things like that, it is absolutely essential you go ahead and do that. But if you're just creating multiple web apps and every time you create a different app service plan where it is not really needed, take a relook at that particular approach. AKS clusters. One of the things that I've seen with AKS cluster is typically developers leave the cluster pretty much the same size as your production cluster. So at least for dev test, if not for all the time, at least during non-business hours, you can now reduce the cluster size to 0 instances also. Okay, so that will, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you had 4 instance cluster, if you shut them down, let's say 0 instances or 1 instance during non-business hours when there are no developers working and all of it, this can be significant savings in terms of your compute costs on a daily basis. Evaluate networking options. Let's say, for example, I've seen people use application gateway for load balancing at layer 7, which because it gives you capabilities like SSL offloading, acting as a web application firewall. But what I've also seen is like, users not being aware that a single app gateway instance, for example, is capable of hosting up to 100 different websites. You don't really need a separate app gateway instance for every app that you put out, which is internet facing. Okay. And similarly, if it is WAF enabled, you still can, for all practical reasons, up to 40 different web apps can be hosted using a single instance of app gateway. So you don't really need to create, 40 different instances, which will be significantly contributing to your cost. Next one is media services. When it comes to media services, there are two things that come into picture. One is the streaming endpoint, which can be standard or the premium. I don't hesitate to tell on the call, if you think you need a premium streaming endpoint, you actually got to be talking to the product team, because for almost 98% of the workloads, standard streaming endpoint combined with the CDN, which is, having points of presence across the globe, it is more than enough. It is significantly more than enough. And in fact, if you think that you need the premium streaming endpoint, product team will be happy to understand what your requirements are and things like that. Because for all practical reasons, I've had customers who use that. We moved back to standard. We never had any issues. They just thought like, hey, the premium is needed. It's not, the standard is fair enough, capable enough along with CD and all of it. The other aspect that comes to media services is basically the encoding charges. Now, encoding can be done in two ways. You can have your own reserved capacity in terms of media reserved units, but that is good for scenario where you have a constant stream of videos that needs to be encoded on a regular basis 24/7. If you have like a bunch of videos coming in once in a while or something like that, it doesn't really make sense for you to have this provision capacity up and running all the time where it is doing nothing. The other way to look at this is if you are not having your dedicated capacity, the encoding will happen as and when the shared capacity becomes available. So if you have something critical, the moment I upload the video, the encoding should start immediately and should be available for streaming immediately. In that case, by all means, go ahead and use it. But evaluate in the context of your application, how frequently do you need encoding and all that. When it comes to app insights and log analytics, the biggest contributor for the cost will be data ingestion. Typically like 5 gigs per month of ingestion is free. 30 days of data retention is free. In App Insights, it is, I guess, 90 days of data retention is free. You can now increase data retention for both of them up to 730 days, I guess. But essentially, if you just have too many resources sending all the diagnostic data, every possible logging that you've enabled, and that's going to your log analytics, or if you're doing application performance management and enabled every metric in the system, and that is sending data to your App Insights workspace, those will contribute significantly to the cost. What you can do probably is, let's say, for example, in case of App Insights, you can enable data sampling. So you can say, hey, I want all data coming in, but in terms of storage, I will average it out, sample it out by 50% or 75% and store only that amount of data. You can also enable daily cap where you can say, hey, I'm going to ingest only X amount of data per day. And the last thing that is available for both Log Analytics and App Insight is you can go ahead and something similar to reserved capacity where you can say, hey, I am ready to pay for 100 gigs of data ingestion every day. Give me a discounted rate, and those prices get discounted by 15 or 20 percentage and things like that. So that is where things change significantly for them. The last one that I want to talk about is multi-region. A significant thought needs to go into this also in terms of where your application is deployed and where your actual customers are. Okay, let's say, for example, you deploy it in India and you have customers primarily in India, but also you're expanding to other markets in Middle East or Southeast Asia and things like that. What is the right approach? Do you need to have another deployment in that region? Or do you just enable CDN, or could it be something else? In all this conversation, the first and the foremost thing that will take priority over everything else will be compliance. If there is a compliance requirement, the data needs to be local, everything else goes for a toss, you need to comply with that. But let's say if you're not dealing with such sensitive data and user, personally identifiable information and things like that, are you okay with data residency anywhere? In that case, evaluate services like Front Door. Front Door is essentially an application accelerator. What that helps you is, for example, if your app is deployed in India, Front Door has same points of presence as CDN. And then if somebody from Middle East, let's say, for example, my location, I'm browsing, what will happen is I will hit the Front Door endpoint in Dubai. And from there, my request will travel to your India data center over a Microsoft private network backbone, not over public internet. Take the response back and then give it to me. This will be, in terms of network latency, significantly better than me going over public internet and hitting your endpoint directly. And at the same time, in terms of cost, it will be much better instead of having deployments in every region, because every region you deploy multiplies your cost. And then take into consideration also the other additional overheads that come in to picture about synchronizing the content, DevOps, challenges with multi-region deployments and all of that. So take into consideration, of course, whatever when it comes to, let's say, disaster recovery planning and things, your business defined RPOs, RTOs will play a significant role. But for simply application that is accessible over internet, that is rolling out globally, evaluative services like Azure Front Door can really, help you without having to deploy in multiple regions and all of that. So having said that, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to stop screen sharing. We'll take the questions here. More than happy. Yeah. Hey, Vinayak. Yep.
Yeah. Hi, Puneet. So we have 3 questions lined up actually. Actually, there are 4. Like the 4th has come in while we were talking. So Rohit wants to know: can we have a customized view of hourly consumed resources and the pricing for the same under ACM?
I need more clarity. Can you please repeat the question once? Yeah.
So he says, can we customize view of hourly consumed resources? So he wants to know how is the consumption progressing hour by hour, and then we want to take action based on that.
I haven't played with that, to be honest, because many of the resources, they're not even built at hourly basis. Some of them at hourly basis, some of them at like minute basis and things like that. In terms of round off, I've seen like per day basis, I've often seen the reports. Hourly basis, I haven't seen, to be honest. Whether it is available out of the box, I'll have to check. I don't have a ready answer, sorry.
Okay. I think the dev test method of actually saving costs was also pretty interesting. I think we received a bunch of comments about that. So Sagar Modi is asking, can we have multiple dev test subscription under a single EA?
Yes, the only challenge or the caveat here is it is not available for sponsored subscription. So if you're already under a Microsoft sponsorship or something of that sort, I don't think so that's available. But once you move to, let's say, enterprise or pay as you go or something like
Yes.
that, you can create as many subscriptions as you want as child subscription. I mean, it's just like any other subscription. You just have to mark it as dev test when you create one.
Cool, cool. Yeah, I think Virendra Malu has also said that he likes that suggestion. So Virendra Malu asked next question. Would you recommend the most cost-effective, low latency, high performance DB type in Azure for storing media files, mainly audio for EduTech customers with a volume space equal to 1 TB? Yeah, so most cost-effective, low latency, high performance audio files for storing audio files under 1 TB, around
Assuming
1 TB.
this, okay, assuming this is about streaming, I would still recommend media services because behind the scene it uses storage and things like that. But if you're just serving the content through your application and not really streaming or something of that sort, you might want to evaluate. In terms of disk performance, I wouldn't recommend going with standard disk at all, either premium disk or maybe Azure files with ultra performance disks and things like that. Mhm. But if it
Yeah,
is streaming, yeah, go ahead, please.
yeah, maybe even Azure Blob Storage if you're just storing the files for. It depends on what the files are used for.
Exactly. If it is streaming, the blob, a single blob will be limited to 60 MB per second of throughput. So if they're going to
Yeah,
be like broadly distributed, which is where it's going to be challenging.
right, right. That is where the media services comes in.
Yep.
Absolutely, makes sense. Um, Shadi Makhtoor is asking, what is the best tool to do logging without affecting the performance?
Most of the logging mechanisms, they don't really affect your performance. They happen asynchronously behind the scenes and things like that. They don't even consume too much of resources as such, to be honest. I don't know, I mean, it's the apt example, but more often than not, when I'm visiting customers practically and things like that, I often tell them like, hey, if you're visiting a doctor, you got to take injections to give blood samples and things like that. There's going to be a bit of pain and things like that, but it's all in the good interest of ensuring you're avoiding major problems and all of it. But when you use any application performance management services like Dynatrace, Azure Application Insights, there are so many other
Splunk.
available. Yeah. They're not significant cost overhead as such, because let's say when it comes to .NET, it's been some time I've actually done some hands-on, but when it comes to .NET and things like that, most of these things are captured using what we call as event tracing for Windows. They're not really plugged into your application execution and stuff like that, but we are tracing those events which are anyways happening behind the scenes. We are filtering out the things that are of interest to us.
Yeah, I think yeah. To add to that, I think a lot of these services for logging actually have been optimized quite a bit, and in the cloud scenario also, I think even in the performance, it is like 1% or probably less than that. So the
Much,
amount
much
of
less.
insight, yeah, much less than that. So the amount of insight that you would get out of that actually kind of more than makes up for that whatever little performance that you get, and it's actually like in lower fractions of a percent. Shirish K asks, how do you get the cost of billing for a sponsored subscription?
Microsoft Azure Sponsorships.com. So if you need to log on to that particular website, it is www.Microsoft Azure Sponsorships plural .com, and then if your account has the permission, you should be able to go. The third option on the left bottom is usage, and you should be able to download usage based on the date range that you specify. We are working to ensure this is available within the portal as part of Azure Cost Management. I don't have an ETA on that, but hopefully soon.
Cool. With that, I think we have finished the questions for this break. Maybe we can finish off with the last presentation just from a time check with just above an hour.
Cool.
So
So we're just
uh,
summarizing, 2 more slides to go. Yep.
yeah, sure. So yeah, and then maybe if there are any other questions, maybe we'll take that to the end and take it on from there.
Okay, perfect. So So pretty much in terms of, let's say, going through everything that we've discussed, although there were some recommendations specific to what do you say, services in Azure that you use and things like that. But more often than not, like if you follow these principles, like in general, my first priority will be governance. It's more important than anything else. But what I've often seen is because it is not a mainstream conversation when it comes to cloud discussions and all of it. It's a free service available out of the box. You have control over your environment. You do not get surprises over your billing and things like that. I would highly recommend you spend time putting in proper compliance controls in place. The next one is dev and test subscriptions for wherever you can use them for non-production workloads. The third one is sizing. Before going for reserved capacity or instances, determine what is the right sizing. Do not compare like, hey, I had X amount of RAM and Y amount of CPU. I provision the same VM. Do you need that? Deploy it, observe it, let's say over a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, couple of peak load cycles, and then decide, hey, is this the right size for my workload? Things have changed, the CPUs have changed. On premise you may have had different things running for few years. In the cloud the hardware is different. Everything changes. There's just too many things that have changed. If you have licenses, do make use of all those hybrid benefits. Okay, and then once this is done, you basically go ahead and think of enabling reserved instances. Please note and be aware, just because you're committing, it doesn't mean you have to pay at one go. You can still go ahead and what do you say, pay on a monthly basis. It is just that the commitment that you're giving, like, hey, I'm going to use this thing. Earlier, it used to be like a particular VM, I guess, but now within the same family, you can switch the VMs also, and your reserved pricing gets adjusted accordingly. Last but not the least, monitoring. Uh, Keep monitoring, in terms of resource consumption, in terms of, have appropriate alerts in place to monitor your KPIs as defined by your businesses for performance levels, for response times, for CPU, memory, whatever it is. Have those things set up and do it proactively. And last but not the least, Azure Advisor. It's available out of the box, free of the cost. I would say, I wouldn't hesitate to say on the call, take an oath. Every once in a week, I will open that tab in Azure portal. Take a look. It's not necessary you follow all of them, but it does provide you very good information almost always, so that even if there are business justification for you to not follow some of those recommendations, it will at least make you aware. And trust me, it takes nothing. At least once a week you should take a look at this, because this is behind the scenes. This is constantly monitoring everything, coming up with set of recommendations for your subscriptions in after taking into considerations how your resources are utilized. This is pretty much a personalized advisor. It is not general as such. Coming back to Aditi's question, how do I go about? Let's say, for example, I have a solution running in Azure right now, and we saw, let's say, for example, I'm spending around like $6,000 a month right now. So how do I go about that? The first and foremost activity is review the consumption charges. You can extract it as a CSV and things like that, and then figure out in terms of what services are contributing to this high cost. You can get your consumption charges either through Azure Cost Management or through, Microsoft Azure Sponsorships.com. Figure out what are the top contributors in terms of your monthly consumption. Now, once we've done that, review those contributors in the context of the application architecture. I'm not making this up. Last week, I spoke to a customer and we figured out for last 12 months, the topmost contributor for their subscription was Azure Firewall. And when I asked them where is it being used, they were absolutely clear, no, we don't use Firewall. And when we went ahead and figured out, oh, it was deployed in a resource group named as POC. And it wasn't deleted at all. It kept on putting on all the charges all the time. So which is where identify the top contributors in the context of your overall application architecture. Once you figure out, hey, my VMs are adding cost, my disks are adding cost, my SQL is adding cost, then you go ahead and start using this service specific recommendations that we discussed earlier in the call and say, oh, VM is using, let's start those discussions. Oh, what percentage of this are non-production? How many of them they need to be running 24/7? Oh, if they don't need to be 24/7, can I use start stop? Okay, let's just do that. And then, similarly for SQL, am I in the right pricing tier? Have I configured the DTUs correctly? This is where you start doing when you are doing it after the fact, which means things are deployed, they're running, and now you want to see, how you can go ahead and optimize and things like that, which is where you can come up with those set of recommendations we discussed earlier on the call. If you are now designing and building, honestly, I would expect after this call, probably you don't end up in this situation because you're aware of common things that we've seen with these customers. So take those into considerations every time you decide, upon a service, upon a pricing tier and all those aspects, upon dev test environments and things like that, take them into consideration. But irrespective of that, trust me, this entire activity typically takes a couple of hours. Maybe do it on a monthly basis. Every first or second or things like that, download your consumptions, take a quick look. You can enable all of this in your Azure Cost Management if you have access to that. But if it is like sponsored subscription, download the CSVs, play around, get to know what's happening, be familiar, don't be surprised. Okay, so that's pretty much in terms of, approach, what we do when it comes to cost optimization and things like that. And trust me, I won't hesitate to say the maximum delta I've gained with the customer in terms of cost optimization is reduced by 63%. And the minimum I've done is like 3%. So right from 3% to 63%, I've had delta, but I really had fun working with the customer where we were able to reduce it only by 3%, essentially because of the fact that I had to literally struggle to figure out if there is anything that is done wrong. And I was happy to see that is pretty much done things in the most optimized way that was possible, So that's how it is. So we come to an end of conclusion. That's my contact in case you need to reach out. I'm also part of Azure App Consult program. So if any of you are part of like Microsoft for startups, you may have an startup engagement manager assigned to your account. You can always reach out to them. And if you want this activity to be done for your subscription, our team will be more than happy to jump on a call and do it alongside you. So just reach out to your startup engagement manager and let them know, hey, we want to talk to App Consult team for cost optimization and things like that. And they'll engage us depending on whatever country you're in. We pretty much spread wide across the globe. Okay. So that's pretty much it from my end at the moment. Thank you for your patience and listening out. We'll open up to any questions you may have now.
We have a couple of questions, Puneet. So the first question is from Rohit. So he says he wants access to Microsoft Azure sponsorships and he doesn't have access. Do you know how to?
They'll need to get in touch with their account owner. So whoever owns that Azure account, subscription account, he'll need to give his email address permission after logging into azuresponsorships.com. Even if he raises a ticket with Microsoft support, I don't think that will work. They will simply say, hey, this email address is the owner of this account. Go ahead and ask him to give the permission.
Yeah. So typically talk to your account manager or SEM, that should work.
No.
Cool.
Sorry, I'll correct here. Not talk to your account manager or SEM, talk to your account owner. So this Azure account has an owner who will have access to Microsoft Azure sponsorship.com and he will need to provide this access.
Okay, the owner role basically. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So is monthly payment for reserved instances available for Cosmos DB as well? This is question by Senthil Kumar Ganpati.
I'll have to check. These things, they change pretty frequently for VMs and other stuff. I'm aware. Cosmos, I haven't checked, but mostly that's the general approach we are taking with all the services. If it's not here, most likely it will come. But to be honest, like everything I mentioned, the numbers and things like on the call, trust me, they are prone to change and all these things. Too many numbers to remember at the same time. But my whole intention was for you to understand the underlying crux and the approach and things like that. Whether for Cosmos DB specifically, we can check online and confirm that. If it's not there for many other services, it's coming. So I don't see a reason why it may not come for Cosmos.
Good. So I'm not sure of the context of this question, but Shirish K asks, are we charged for the traffic that comes to a VM from an external source? How do we know the usage bandwidth of incoming and
Egress.
outgoing bandwidth to a
Ingress,
VM?
yeah, ingress is free, incoming is always free. Egress, the outgoing bandwidth is what we charge you for. When you go to Azure Monitor, select a VM, there are performance counters or metrics available for you to determine what amount of bandwidth is being used. Even for VMs, when you go to, let's say, select a particular VM and go to overview screen, you will be able to see the network usage as well. But as a thumb rule, ingress is free, egress is what we charge you for. Egress is what we charge you for, even if it is going to your own resource group in a different data center.
That makes sense. It's fairly consistent that way.
Mhm.
I think that's all with the question. I think the and thank you, Puneet. I think it was a very insightful session. Found bunch of tips and tricks myself. And I like the approach, right? You set up the context and then you talk about specific services and then we kind of did a recap of how to do. And one of the key takeaways for me was like the curation, right? Just as we last week we had us webinar on security and like security even cost is like a process, right? You have to keep on
Mhm.
looking at it as you
Correct.
make changes. You keep on curation, like in some sense, like as people say, you have to tend the garden once in a while. Check your
Mhm.
DBs, check your VMs, check your CDN usage, and then there
Yes.
will be opportunities. And I think also the other key takeaway for me was, I think many of the things, like the partition key or the architecture, changing the architecture actually gives you the biggest benefits rather than you
Mhm.
doing small tweaks on the VMs as well. So I
Mhm.
think these are, I think, the two takeaways. And also make sure that whenever you delete something, all of the associated resources are also deleted. I think that is also some common mistakes
Mm.
that we have seen among a lot of customers.
Yep. Remember, like, just because you're running something on the cloud, the service provider is not responsible for everything. They're responsible to ensure that the services are running, not for the applications that are hosted as such. Because I've seen enough number of times where somebody's written some kind of code which, is just crashing your application and all of that. There's nothing much we can do about it. So it's always like we are not delegating the responsibilities. We're delegating the responsibilities at the infrastructure level. Everything else. I still see like there's a lot of work we can always do in terms of optimizing, in terms of cost, security, scalability, availability, performance, whatever it is. There are still a lot of learnings, and in spite of doing this hundreds of times for every call I do with the customer on cost optimization, there's still something new to learn. It's always going to be the case, and that's something I love working with cloud. There's every new case, every new customer, there's something new to learn.
Thank you, Puneet, for that insightful session. I think with that we will end. I think the slides and the presentation will also be the recording also will be available on demand on the website. We are also planning to put it up on YouTube. Next week we will also have a webinar on Azure Machine Learning. You should look forward to that, and we'll hope to see you, at least some of you, on the next webinar. Thank you, Puneet. Thanks for that
Sure.
insightful session. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everybody. Have a good evening. So it's like Thursday. I'm based in Dubai, so have a good weekend to everybody as well. So hope to see you guys around soon. And for those in startups, Microsoft for Startup program, feel free to reach out to your startup engagement manager to engage us in case you would like to do this customized for your particular subscriptions. Thanks, Vinayak, and goodbye, everybody. Cheers.
Bye. Cheers. I'm sorry about that. The social media challenge winner is Aditi Goswami, and we shall reach out to you very soon. And for the swag bag. Thank you so much. I missed that. Apologies for that. Thank you.